Hi there, this is N7.2, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. All right, so the first indicator says, provide a justification, that means prove that it's true or show your work, for the placement of a decimal when you're doing sums or differences, so that is adding and subtracting, for decimals up to the thousandths, and that is your third place value, because this is tenths, this is hundredths, this is thousandths. So they're doing 3 decimal places. Sorry. Provide justification for the placement of a decimal in a product. So product means that you're multiplying. And they're saying here, if you have 2 decimal places in that part and 1 in that part for a total of 3, that you're going to have 3 decimal places in the end. Oh, and this one is, actually they just estimated, they called that 12 and they called that 2, so they know you should be getting an answer roughly 24. Okay. Provide justification for the placement of a decimal in a quotient, so that means that you're dividing. Okay, so again, you're thinking this is sort of like 50, this is like 2, so I should be getting an answer approximately 25. So estimation becomes really important when you're working with decimals, because if you don't have the decimal in the right place, you're going to do 50 divided by 2 and get maybe 250 because you didn't put the decimal in the right spot. So you should be able to tell right away if you've got the right answer or not based on your estimate. Then we do problem solving with adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And this one says solve a problem involving multiplying or dividing decimals with more than 2-digit divisors or multipliers. So we're getting just using bigger numbers. Same strategy, it's just a little bit longer question. Be able to estimate to see if your answer is reasonable. Solve problems that involve these operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Again, we're only using 3 decimal places, the thousandths. And, oh yes, the ever popular order of operations. This becomes really important. Gotta know BEDMAS. Okay, and then explain using examples why we use BEDMAS. All right, let's go. Okay, adding and subtracting decimals is just like regular adding and subtracting. If they give you a question that looks like this, where it's written straight across, you need to rewrite it like that. It has to go up and down, and you have to line up your decimals, okay? So you know that in the answer, your decimal is also going to be lined up, okay? And so then they've done the adding for us, and they've got an answer of 75. If we were to estimate, we would say, well, that's kind of like 60, and that's kind of like 20, or 60 and 18 is 78. So the fact that we're getting a 75, yep, that's pretty close. We know our decimal's in the right spot. So that's all you need to know for adding and subtracting, is line up your buttons. Multiplying decimals is a little bit different. First of all, you don't need to worry about how they're lined up, except that just like with regular multiplying, everything has to line up on the right side. Okay, so if they've given you 2.14 times 1.3, sometimes I've seen students try to do this. And then they don't know what to do with this spot, right? And so you don't need to line up your decimals like you do with adding, right? Those guys don't have to line up. So just line them up the right side like you would normally do. And then you're working with each individual number. Okay, so we're going to do 214 times 3, which is 642, right? And then we're going to do 214 times the 10. What they didn't put in here is that they've started with a 0, so we need to hold that place value with our 0, because now we're multiplying by 10, right? This was 214 times 3, and this is 214 times 10. Now we don't worry about the decimals at this point. We're just doing the math, and we'll put those in afterwards. Okay, then they add it up and they get 2782. So now you can go back to your question and think, how many decimal places were in the question? Right, there was 2 on the first guy and 1 in the next guy for a total of 3. So that means that you're going to put 3 decimal places in the answer, and you end up with 2 and 782 thousandths. Okay, remember we read this part and name it by the last guy's place value. Okay, dividing decimals. Let's use yellow. Okay, so 5 into 2.35. The first thing they did was put the decimal on top of the Dave, because decimals need that top bunk buddy too, and they have to live right up and down from each other. Okay, and then they thought, does 5 fit into 2? Nope. Does 5 fit into 23? Yep. 20 will work, which is 4 times, and there's 3 left over. Okay, let's move over to the next spot. They bring down the 5. Now they're working with 35. Does 5 fit into 35? Yes, it does. Remainder 0. And we use the 5 7 times, so our answer is 0.47. So remember that the decimals have to line up in a Dave. Now, next year you might learn that when you're dividing with decimals outside the Dave, Dave does not like decimals knocking at his door. So if you have a decimal here living outside the Dave, Dave is not going to be happy about that. So he would ask that you move your decimal over to the end. Okay, so they've moved it right here. And now they're working with 345 instead of 3.45. But what you do to the outside of the Dave, you must do to the inside of the Dave. If we've moved it twice to get the decimal away from the door, then we have to move it twice on the inside. And so now our new decimal is living here, and we've put it up top. Okay, so they've labeled this as step 1, move the outside. Step 2, what you do to the outside, you must do to the inside. Step 3, get the bunk buddy up top. And then divide as you normally would. All right, order of operations, it's your favorite and mine. Okay, so all these signs can get pretty confusing. So we have to have some sort of rules that go with them. So let's just review this real quick. Anything in brackets needs to be done first. So when we look at our question, we've got a whole bunch of stuff in brackets. Okay, are there any exponents in this question? No, so we don't need to do those. Is there any division? Nope. Is there any multiplication? Yes, right here. So we need to do that first. 1.7 times negative 45. 1.7 times 45 is 76.5, and because it was negative 45, we're looking at negative. So I'm just bringing down everybody else. 17, this sign had to change because when we did the multiplication, it ended up negative. When you add a negative, you're simply subtracting. Now we have these two negative signs, and anytime you have signs that match, that means it's positive. Okay, and then the guy on the end. Now, because we're done all the multiplication, all that's left is adding and subtracting. It actually doesn't matter what order you do these in. If you start with the 18.6 and you add this and you take away that and you take away that, you will get the same answer, because adding and subtracting, you can do it in any order, it won't matter. If you had multiplying in here and dividing, you would work this stuff from left to right. And that's important because if you have something like okay, you would not want to do the 4 times 5 first, because that's 20, and 8 divided by 20, oh, that's a weird number, right? So don't do that. You have to work from the left side over to the right side. 8 divided by 4 you would do first, which would be 2, and then times 5, oops. So your answer there would be 10. Okay, so if we added all of our numbers together here, sometimes it's nice to start with your positives and then subtract and subtract, just a little bit easier. So whatever you want to do. Okay, that is it for decimals. Remember, for adding and subtracting, you need to line up the buttons. Okay, everything has to line up. For multiplying, it's count how many were in the answer or in the question and put that many in the answer. For dividing, if there's a decimal here in the decimal goes there in the answer. And you'll learn next year that Dave does not like decimals out here. So if we have to move it over, then we have to move it over on the inside too, and now it's here instead of here. Okay, good luck with decimals.